went and got my face done.
PR Connections Radio presents.
Hey, welcome to Voices of Humanity at prconnectionsradio.com. We have a great show for you today. Stay tuned. Voices of Humanity, we need to hear your voices. We need to hear your voices. Hey, Lorrie, you were with me at the beginning. We should do that over. No, I'm just kidding. It's fine. Anyway, I am Sandra McKechnie, your host, and this is my lovely guest. This is Lorrie Simunovic. I don't even know if I'm saying that right. Is that better? Is that getting better? Okay.
It's always right.
Okay. Lorrie, I think this is is it our fourth time together? This is our fourth time together, and we have a wonderful show for you. You know what I say from the beginning, it's not your fault or mine, but together we can do something about it. First, I want to give a shout out to some collaborators I'm with. One of them is Jelly Social. They're a fantastic group, a networking group, not just a networking group. They're my BIPOC connections, and they have amazing people as partners, and I'm one of them. Jelly Social, hook them up on Facebook, and also Local Street. Ooh, that's another with coaches, a bunch of coaches and a bunch of other professionals, and I collaborate with them as well. It's a privilege for me to be here. Voices of Humanity, I am your host, and we're so grateful that you're going to join us. And I hope we want to give you content. We want to help each other. You know, in the words of Rodney King, can't we all just get along? But it takes a little bit more than that. And so on this show, we want to be candid. We want to be a little more candid with you than anything else. Candid conversations are just not black and white. Well, look at us here today. It's a little pun. But anyway, we are here to give you some beautiful content. And Lorrie was here last week, and we were just going to do a little, give you a little snapshot of what we did last week so that you can, those of you who might be tuning into this for the first time, that it might just you might get a little more connectivity. Lorrie, did you want to start that? I'm going to pull up just from our little points from last week. Just a little snapshot. And then we got some nice meat and potatoes for you too to go into. You want to start?
You go ahead. You had the first question, I think. So that sounded rough. I think you had a question you wanted to know about getting it. Is that what you're...
Well, yeah, just the first two that we did last week. Well, one of them was getting it.
Right.
And then you were going to get a little bit into more of the Eurocentric focus.
Okay.
Cover a little bit of how we started.
Okay, so we were in general talking about anti-racist work. We were talking initially, now it's kind of moved to a more intersectional analysis based on an essay that I wrote for a lecture on the role of a white person in anti-racist work. And then we started shifting more and more towards the work and had a number of conversations, which are on the other podcasts. And you asked me before this podcast to talk about getting it. And in terms of getting it in this work, when we talk about any form of oppression or Eurocentricity, there's generally intersectional relations of domination and subordination. So in terms of getting it from my perspective, if we're going to be authentic, getting it is defined by the communities that are oppressed. Or defined by the communities that are experiencing injustice, right?
Oh, and that's when you had asked me what it is to me.
That's right. And nice segue. Go for it.
Well, yes. For me, I said awareness and action, which it was just the thing that came out of inside of me, where people are wanting to do the work. want to get in here and they really mean it. Other groups, want to help, or Indigenous people or Koreans or people from India that are going through oppression and dehumanization. And people want to get that on some level. And I say, that we didn't get into scat yet, but that scat isn't scat is is saturation, conversion, application, and transformation. So it's almost like you believe it with your mind. You believe, yes, no, you're right. I understand. I get the dehumanization, but when you start to get it, then there's an action. So it's becoming aware in action, becoming aware of your own awareness, kind of a thing. That's what getting it means to me.
Right. And that when you come to that awareness, there's an unlearning. And to me, unlearning is elimination or a minimization of thoughts, emotions, behaviors, and so on, and systems that serve. I can't, one of the more, I've heard one that says, that used to work but doesn't work. I don't know if oppression ever really worked, except for the benefit of one group, right? So I say eventually let's eliminate it.
Unlearning. I love that.
Right.
Well,
and we relearn and we reconstruct, right?
Right.
Because we often in the European Eurocentric context come in and there's an agenda of what needs to be learned. It's obvious who's going to get the main role. Usually it's obvious, who's going to get the higher grade for what skills and so on and so forth. And as that's valuable. And there's an unlearning that there's more that's valuable. There's more at the margins that have to be brought into the center.
So I'm thinking it's kind of like when, my sister knows me, like she's known me all her life, all my life. We get along really well. Or even a good friend that thinks they know you so well. They know everything about you.
Yeah.
But there's parts of you that they may not know about. Or they may have had a perception of you your whole life. That's an error because, you know what I mean? So I'm thinking, and there's some things I notice even about people dear to me that I have to unlearn and not put them in a box because I figure I know that personality, but I don't know them. There's parts of them I don't know. Is that something similar?
Yes.
Like having to unlearn things that you think because you've been seduced into thinking if a person dresses a certain way, that's what they are. You label them as something inordinate. And you don't know that person really.
It's like a deprogramming.
A deprogramming like that, the unlearning. Deprogramming. I'm putting that down.
Okay.
And what was the other part? So that's part of the Eurocentric focus.
So Eurocentricity, as I understand it, there's many definitions out there. Is everything is, if you think of colonization, if you think of oppression, that kind of thing, if you think of various intersections of power relations of dominance and subordinates, there's a story. And to some extent, it's not true that it's at the center, that it's the most important, but there's this sense that all things European, Western Europe, are and the ways of viewing the world, the assumptions, the beliefs, and so on, are somehow superior, and that's been imposed on us from our little feet. Right? It's from the very first podcast when Baldwin talks, when I read the quote by Baldwin, where he talks about it becomes a force within us. Right? And Eurocentricity, and it's not just people of European descent. It's all of us. We're all trained in this way. Certainly in North America. I mean, even the concept of North America is a European concept. It used to be called Turtle Island.
Yes, definitely.
So it's still Turtle Island to many.
It is. To many people, it still is.
And there are still many nations that have not been conquered, right? For example. So you asked me about Eurocentricity. You wanted to know more about that, or?
Well, did you want to get into the meat? I'm going to let this cat out. What will happen will happen. She's banging on the door. And sorry. Yeah, we can, or do you want to delve into the big part of it, or are we just those 3 points?
Just ask me the questions, and I'm happy to answer. Yeah.
You were going to cover, like, the beginning, you had rewrote those 3 points that we've been kind of pushing
Right.
through.
We were talking initially about, acknowledging our, we all
And
have
examining Eurocentricity and the ways in which it has been used to oppress others. And so we just wanted a little bit on that, on those 3 points, and then we can move on to the other.
Okay. The ways
that was acknowledge and examine.
Yes.
Right? Remember you rewrote those? So I'm going to put those on when I put it up as well.
Okay, good point. So thank you for reminding me.
It's okay.
So there's basically in one conceptualization of oppression is a triangle. So you've got ideas, ideology, right? Individual acts and systemic oppression, if you're going to look at oppression. So in terms of ideas, X group is taking our jobs. There's something that comes in our brain that we're probably going to have something there, whether it's true or not, like that can be unpacked, but that's how these systems get set. X group are terrorists. This is an ideas level, and we begin to believe these ideas, right? X group are criminals. On an individual act, we have things like name calling, hate crimes, and exclusion in general, and that gets played out in many ways. On a systemic level, if you're talking about Eurocentricity, we're not saying things European are bad or good, right? We're saying Eurocentricity in particular, when you're talking about imposing your values and your systems on a systemic level, things like racial profiling, misogyny, patriarchy, these are all forms of domination. And of course, there's much more. I'm
going to jump in for a minute. Keep that thought, because I was going to say, can you imagine? That never happened before. We've got the cat in the thing. It's live. What can I say? But trying to get something I didn't watch. Anyway, where was I? Acknowledge and examine Eurocentricity and the ways in which it has been used to oppress others. Where was I going? Lorrie, continue. I lost my train of thought.
I think you correct me if I'm wrong. When you heard me talk about racial profiling, denial of education, denial of jobs, housing.
Okay, yes. The challenge for me is it really isn't about us not thinking that everything whiteness is wonderful and everything is Eurocentricity is about, that's somebody's culture. That's somebody's upbringing. That's who you are. That's great. That's a nation of people. But when it's imposed, right? Yes. So others have the right to have culture, ethnicity, and how that shows up in the world. So really, it's collaborating and helping people to even just take a look at that through a different lens, right? Like I went out with a friend one time. There was 3 of us. I gave the story. I've given the story before. There was my white sister girl, and then there's 3 of us blackies. We were sitting there. Bywords, I know, whitey, blackie, but just for all intents and purposes. So anyway, we were sort of disowning certain things because we kind of got woke and we were looking at some stuff, and we really wanted to embrace culture and understand who we were and look back at what biblically, spiritually, who our people are. And a lot of that is huge for a lot of us. Okay, we might not talk about it openly, but anyway, just disowning certain things in this sort of Eurocentric construct that doesn't belong to us. So we got to my white sister girl, whom I've known for over, oh my gosh, a long time, very long time. And I was disowning this and that and saying, no, I want to replace that, to make my culture more appropriate to me. So she said, well, I don't know what to disown. I don't know. And it came to me, then I went, oh my goodness, this is where you are. This is, your people are here from you can remember. Your people have been here for generations. Yeah, you're not the original people, but you have been here for generations. So she didn't have anything to disown. And because she walks into a room, she's comfortable anywhere.
That's right.
You can show up anywhere and be comfortable. You know what I mean?
That's right.
For us, it's different. Is that similar? Does that fit?
Yeah, no, that's a beautiful example of the different positions on a systemic level as being played out on an individual level. I would challenge that sister. I don't know her, so maybe I'm being arrogant here, so please check.
Go ahead. Try.
I would challenge her. Does she really know her history? Does she really know her roots, or does she know the roots of what she was taught from her small feet? because there's all different kinds of cultures and backgrounds. So, maybe I'm making some assumptions. Maybe she does know her history.
Something to think about.
People are really surprised that, about when you hear about the story of enslavement from a Eurocentric perspective versus like there are things that get mixed, then enslavement not mixed from, say, an African perspective. And it's not like monolithic, one is African, but there's different ways that the stories come through. We make assumptions about what we think we know, but there's, people who are in our own Eurocentricity don't even know what the nuances are, that it's not necessarily binary, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah.
It's not here or there, black or white. It definitely, metaphorically, literally. Yeah, I agree. So when you acknowledge
at the same time, sorry for interrupting you.
Go ahead.
Time, I agree with you that she's acknowledging her privilege, right? She's acknowledging that her story and her history is acknowledged in schools, in the way that she dresses, and the way that she is. She doesn't even have to think about this.
Not at all. And she's just the loveliest person. So inadvertently, without an intent that's evil or anything, this is what it is. This is where I have been. I don't have to be concerned about where I show up in the world. And when I go and ask for a loan, that's not my issue.
Yeah.
Right. How people are going to see me in what neighborhood.
Yeah.
So for the most part. So that's acknowledging and examining Eurocentricity and the ways in which it has been used. There's a lot on that. That could be just a whole show. Did you want to go to number 2, speaking out against various forms of oppression when we see it?
Right, and the way to do that is to develop critical consciousness and cultural humility. So when we talk about critical consciousness, we're talking about digging deeper, looking for all of the perspectives, the multiple worldviews, the multiple world values. The fact, in the 20s there was a Renaissance in America. I believe it was in Harlem, where I can't remember the exact name, but basically all the art of African American people was coming, and there was a whole Renaissance around that because it had been suppressed. But rather than it being kind of like a celebration and dance thing, while that's important, it's a profound piece of the people of Harlem. Right. So it's like that's just one tiny example. It's developing when we're working together culturally, rather than looking at I'm examining my own culture. I'm examining both positive and negative. Both, whether it's going beyond the binaries and finding out what the real story is in relationship. Right. And that work is fraught with both pain and joy. And it's moving forward together. So
I got there's an example of critical consciousness. You want me to read it, or are you going to read it?
Sure,
I like that. Critical consciousness. This is Lorrie's work, and she's done the research. She's got bodies of work, and I know she's going to publish soon. She's working on it. There's so much, and there's so much research that goes into what she does. Critical consciousness refers to the ability to understand and analyze social, economic, and political conditions that contribute to inequality and oppression. I was thinking of this. What was this lady's name? She wrote a book called Waking Up White. Forgot her name. But it's in one of these learnings that I do. And she was saying that, it's interesting that she came out of the womb. She slid out of the womb in privilege. She didn't have to worry. She had political privilege, economic privilege, social privilege. And I know people might not like that word, but that's the only one we have right now. But and so don't get your backs up, try, okay? Because this is the words that we use to say, we've got people in the margins and others are not. And we're not wishing anybody to be in the margins, right? Or to experience oppression and dehumanization. But there are ways in which people do kind of slide out of the womb, depending on who your parents are, your forefathers, with social privilege, economical privilege, political, all of it. So she recognized that, oh my goodness, I really have benefited. And when the GIs came home after the Second World War and they were handing out her father bought a home for next to nothing, and he sold it in 40 years later for $1 million. At that time, that was a huge amount of money.
Yeah.
So she was saying how she was able even to accrue. So when we're thinking critically, I think about things logically too, right? So when that's part of it. She's able to accrue all of this wealth. And she's not going to throw it away to please me and say, well, look, see, I'm with you. No, I'm just saying, look at what it is. All of that critical thinking, I think, Lorrie, when people put all the pieces together, you know, what do we come up with as we start thinking about how logical some of this is, that it's not about fault, but together you and I can do something about it. Lorrie and I are trying to do that, and I hope you join us. Continue, Lorrie. Don't mind me. I just thought I had.
You completed it. That's exactly it. I love the way that you said it. You have a much better grasp of history than I do. I'm still learning. So yeah.
So that's the definition of critical consciousness, like that. Oh, it's not the whole thing. It involves, critical consciousness involves recognizing the systemic and structural factors that create and maintain these conditions, and questioning the dominant narratives that justify the reinforcement of them. You know, this is great. I challenged a few coaches in the States, and they brought me on in this little capsule, and I had a chance to speak, and one of my guests came out of that, and she came on the show, and we continued it with that conversation. But it was more of people that are going out here coaching and just putting up their shingle, which, you know, that's great. Everybody and their grandmother coaching. Grandmother has a right to have a business too. But it's sort of, you know, what makes us think that I can just walk in put up my shingle, and an Indigenous person comes, and I just start doing my thing, what I've been taught, you know. Lorrie can't get a hold of herself. Pull yourself together. Let me crack up here. But who am I to think that I can just, you know, just because, again, here I'm in this construct, and I've been born here, whether you're Black even, or you've been totally assimilated into whiteness, well, skin is going to hold you back. You won't get that much privilege in the long run. But, you know, if you're a white person, say, or a person that presents white, how is it that you think you can just come in and coach an Indigenous person, or a person from Korea that was an adopted from when after the war, when there were these babies that all were adopted? This was like a fad. It was a business. How is it that we think we can just sit and coach anybody? I think it's a little presumptuous. You know? And I'm probably, I shouldn't say that. I probably it's because people aren't aware. You just want to do the best for everybody, and it is a little bit naive. You know?
Yeah, I agree, and I've been doing this work for a very long time, as you know, and I still have so much to learn. I still make mistakes. And so that's why I think we've said this on other podcasts. We've talked about, you know what you know, you don't know. And you don't know what you don't know, and that you don't know what you don't know usually happens in relationship, and sometimes it's painful when you find out, oops, I just did it, right? And I think in this kind of work, hopefully there's room for grace and for making mistakes. But when you double down and say, well, that's not a mistake because I think I'm right, you know, if we get stuck in that, doesn't matter what the point of view is, then that's when we maintain Eurocentricity and positions of dominance. There's a famous Black man. His first name is Terry. I've seen him on Netflix. Anyway, he had a difficult upbringing, and he had this beautiful phrase. He said that you can't control somebody and love them at the same time. It's just not possible, right?
Wow.
So if you're in a position where you're dominating somebody, whether it's in personal relationship or in work relationship, I remember once when I was training manager, this is way back, and I was doing some work, and I was trying to, you know, work on the power relations in the organization and in my team in particular. See, I even just said it now, my team and our team, right? And we'd have meetings, right, rather than supervision. And one of the managers, even later when I told another managers, we called them meet withs, and it worked really well. Even with people that weren't doing well, we would find ways to do well better together. Right.
Yeah.
And I really took into consideration both the emotional piece, but also the accountability piece. And there's a way to do that respectfully. And you can even, you know, I wrote a thing, a KPI piece on emotional intelligence. There's a way to do it, right?
Yeah.
Anyway, but the manager said to me, well, if it's not working out and you want to fire this person, you can't do that. You got to let them know that you have the power. To me, that's problematic. I mean, there is some wisdom in what she said.
Yeah.
And there are other ways of getting out of that Eurocentric mindset.
Most definitely. A lot of things are there. Yeah, that could be a whole show.
Sorry, I keep laughing. It's our connection. Forgive us.
That could be a whole show right there. And it's like I said to you when I'm gonna just allude to it when I had somebody at work had a challenge with me, and they were writing things about me, different things. They're alluding to things in a book that we had there to communicate with. And I remember they started to call me with another friend of theirs, another coworker. Oh, she's such a blonde. You're like a blonde. And I would laugh with them because I was sleeping. I would laugh with them. I was just, I'm a blonde. Wanting so much to belong, wanting so much to be further assimilated and be in whiteness. White is right. Brown, stick around. Black, get back. Of course.
Wow, I haven't heard that one.
Wow. White is right. Brown, stick around. Black, get back. Of course, we push back against that on Voices of Humanity, fueled by double consciousness. But anyway, the challenge there was, so I took this person to the table with management, and it's interesting because the things that were being written, the things that were being said, there was somebody else trying to wake me up and going, this person is insulting you. Sandra, who are you? And I thought, I don't know. Well, there was a part of me in a multi-generational way that kind of stood up. DNA, epigenetics came to the surface. I didn't understand it at the time as much, but I took this person to the table and I said, A, B, C, and D, E, F, G, this has to stop. Sure enough, the person started to cry. And manager looked at me and said, see now, you've made her cry. So that feeling, that something was wrong with me, a little bit of like a gaslighting thing, that feeling that no, you're the problem, kind of started to come to me. And then I pushed back and I held my shoulders up and I sat and I chilled for a minute, counted to 10. And then I said, tears are not enough. And that was the end of it. And it never happened again. All of the foolishness.
That's wonderful. What that is, that's a Eurocentric DARVO. It's an acronym created by around responses to trauma by Jennifer Frey, I think her name is. Deny, attack, and reverse the order of victim and offender. DARVO.
Really?
Yeah. I mean, there's many strategies, and it's a form of domination. And I'm not saying that this manager was conscious of that. And I think we talked about in the last podcast, that manager actually allowed that opening. A lot of managers would have doubled down and maybe called you in, and that didn't happen. You didn't get punished. A big piece of it was your strength, the biggest piece, right? And you just told the truth, and it worked. And at the same time, both the woman and the man, like, you're the one that's well, you're not a victim, but I mean, in this, theoretical framework, you're being victimized, right?
Yeah.
And then that gets turned around.
Yes, because all of a sudden, even though I had strength,
people have mortgages, or they have depending on where they're at psychologically, if they went through something as a young person. She was more kind of into the behavioral psychology, trauma, that piece. But it's a beautiful piece to see. You start to notice these things of, oh my God, I've just done a DARVO, or somebody's done a DARVO on me, right?
Okay. Because honestly, though we exude strength, and I knew what to do because I didn't understand like I understand now, but there was something in me, like I said, whether it was my multi-generational, the epigenetics, my DNA, whatever, coming back to say, girl, this is what it is. You might not know, but you need to stand up right now. Yeah. And that it's the hardest thing that people don't understand for some of my people to do, Indigenous brothers and sisters as well. It's the hardest thing to do is not to actually cower, though you're going like this. It's the hardest thing not to cower on the inside of yourself. And this is why I love doing what I do. And this is why you got to come back so we can have these candid conversations, girl. Because truly, when, I used to sing a lot, and I went to this thing and I was singing, it was booked over the phone, right? A friend of mine booked it, got it for me. So I came into this place and there were all these fur coats. Sorry. That's what we used to call people, rich white women back in the day. I'm so sorry. Excuse me, forgive me. But that's what people would call it. Even them would call themselves fur coats. So we walked in with a friend of mine, and there was money in the room and fine china. So she was singing one month, I was singing the next. You guys have probably heard this if you watch all the shows. Well, I went up and I said, I'm singing with my, with Pollyanna. I'm singing. It's going to be great. Yay. And so she looked at me, she stood with her stance, and she says, oh, I don't think so. And I looked and I went, no, look in the book. Because she was looking in this book. All right. I said, look in the book. It was like I was at the pearly gates and asking her to look in the Lamb's Book of Life to see if my name was written there. But she was looking, no, I don't think so. I think I'll have to call you. I'll have to look into that. And something happened on the inside of me that was I didn't know what it was. I thought, what are you doing? Don't use that card. The R card. You're not supposed to use that race card. It's only for absolute emergencies. And even if you use it, remember, people, you should be ashamed of yourself. Well, I felt this way, and I went and I sat down, and my friend, who is white, came and she plopped herself down in front of me, and I was feeling so dejected, so, I guess the word would be dehumanized at the moment. And she just didn't even have to say anything. It was what is exuding from inside of her. And my friend sat down and she said, oh my God, I think she's prejudiced. And I just remember exhaling a little bit of relief, but also feeling like, is this where we are? I thought I was white. I was doing so well with my assimilation process, Now I'm woke, and
that was totally a macro assault. It wasn't even a micro assault.
Yeah.
Because it's not only our words, it's our demeanor, it's the energy that we're coming at. Yeah, wow. That's a really powerful.
That's a big deal. That ties in to acknowledging and examining your Eurocentricity and the ways in which it has been used to oppress others. Don't you think?
Yeah, absolutely.
And even speaking out against various forms of oppression when we see it. Sometimes we don't know what to say. Sometimes maybe people count the cost. I don't know, Lorrie, and it's not worth it to people maybe. But there are times when you know something, the truth, the certain amount of truth you get that can make you free everybody, and that you have the liberty to speak and be calm and still have humility before God and be blessed and strong in saying what you need to say. That others, and I know people are tired of teaching, Lorrie, right? So, but it's like, there are moments when you do have to say, listen, tears are not enough here. I will regulate my emotions right now, so I'm not at the mercy of my behaviors.
Right.
Oh, what do you think?
The whole tears thing is very interesting. We talked about that in the last show. I mean, of course, we all have emotion, and I don't claim to be an expert, but I mean, when we're dealing with power relations and hurting somebody, and that person then starting to cry, even if they're crying, part of it is managing your emotions, but the other part of it, is it manipulation, right? Is it they can't take their own medicine? For maybe that's not a good expression, but they can't take being taken on. They'll take you on, but when they're taken on, it's such a shock to their system that there's a crying there. And like, how do you deal with that? And is that even appropriate? Like, they're making it about themselves, is what I'm trying to say, right?
Definitely.
Yeah.
At that moment, it's about the crying. It's not about the injustice, or just even looking at what it looks like, and why
which is again a bit of a Darvo. I don't know how conscious or unconscious it is, but it's like, at the very least, like really self-important and self-centered, where only what I say matters. And when we're in a position of dominance, that's really how it works. Only what I say matters. I'll listen to you if it's going to benefit me. That's what to a great extent what dominance is about. Would you agree with that?
Absolutely. Now, I know even a couple of my white sister girls in my life, I will call them on A or B. I know we try not to let it affect our dinner and our time out together. Be like, Lord, Sandra, can't we just get along, But I do try to say, okay, you know what? That kind of saying that I know you didn't mean anything by it, saying that I come on a little strong in areas, that's been used to kind of put us in our place, coming on a little strong, or you get, or my African brothers and sisters, and they're from Nigeria or whatever, and they're really exuberant. I love me some Nigerian movies, y'all. Okay, so I'm just, but
Me
so
too.
there's this thing that people do that now you're just too loud. I see it all the time. You're just coming and looking at us. You're angry. Well, there's a lot more backstory to that again. Right? We that Eurocentricity and the ways in which it has been used to oppress others.
Right. That's a story that's being created about you, because it also happens with women in general. And if a white woman does it, it gets taken on, depending on the context, it gets taken on in a different way. If a man does it, it gets taken on in a different way. So it's a story that's been imposed, right? It changes the sensibilities of Eurocentricity. This is the way, like, I remember, sorry, Mom, I'm going to tell the story. I was at the movies with my mom as a teenager, right? She'd probably laugh. And there was something, I can laugh really loud. I mean, really loud as a teenager. And I think it's the only time I remember being at the movies with her. And I just could not stop laughing. Something was so funny. And I was loud. And she got so upset with me, because we're trained as women that you have to be quiet, at least the way I was trained. And you have to be gentle, and you have to be like, anger is bad, jealousy is bad. Meanwhile, these are all kind of emotions. And of course, somebody's going to feel jealous if systematically they're being neglected or left out. That's what jealousy is. I feel neglected. Hey, when's it my turn?
That's interesting. I kind of, it's funny because I used to think, years ago, if somebody told me to watch a Nigerian movie, I'd be like, are you crazy? Even back when we were in school and somebody told you to go back, go back to Africa. That was an insult, because they had us so constructed in here that we were you go to just talk about Africa would be you're going back there to swing on trees and monkeys. And of course, the pseudoscientists have already put their 2 cents in that we are one step above primates. So when you think about the ways that we have been used, things have used, to oppress us politically, right, socially. So how do people, I love this part again, and we haven't even got into the good stuff yet. It's 5:37. Okay, so seeing that, where we're talking about, so we acknowledge and examine our Eurocentricity and the ways in which it has been used to oppress others. Okay,
right.
So how do we now, again, just that little part, speaking out against various forms of oppression when we see it? Like, so I did Tears Are Not Enough, or however that looks. I didn't do it when I went to sing, and the woman, my friend kind of did it. It was like, oh my goodness, they're prejudiced. She allowed me to know, and that gave me a way of feeling, okay, that was it. I didn't take my race card out and use it inappropriately.
I don't think there's such a thing as a race card. I don't know if I'm saying that right. I think that just even think of the term political correctness, right? And that's kind of what she's saying. Political correctness, like, people in the dominant group was, like, I have to watch what I say, freedom of speech. Whereas people from, and I'm totally making a binary, it can come together more. People who are in a more subordinate position, and we all have both subordinate and privilege in terms of our identities, right? Are saying, like, you're just doing a darbo, you're deflecting, you're minimizing what I'm saying. And I think telling a woman of Caribbean descent, I think that's how you said you self-identified, that she's doing the race card. To me, it's inappropriate. You have an impact on yourself, on your soul. And she might just think, it's a little thing. It's a little microaggression. What's the big deal? And she wouldn't even call it an aggression, but you experience that on a daily basis, and you're with friends now. And now you're not allowed to feel safe enough saying, could we just set a bit of a boundary here? I know you well enough that you would have said it respectfully. So I don't know, like, I'm not telling you what to think or feel, but this whole race card thing really triggers me in that. That's a very Eurocentric phrase.
Yeah. They love to use that too. They flip it around. That's why sometimes we should. It's something we're not allowed to use. Shh, because it's only in dire emergencies. It's in your handbag. But okay, so the next one, speaking out. When we think of forms, ways that people are audience, some things that, of course, I guess first we need to have a certain amount of, perhaps that would help, awareness and a little bit of knowledge, right?
So there's again, it's on all three levels, ideological level, systemic level, and individual level. I think right now you're implying on an individual level. But I think on a systemic level, you want to know what's actually going on. Like, what are we speaking out to? So you were giving some examples, and please, like, realign me if I'm not using the right terminologies. You're talking about microaggressions, aggressions, racism, harassment. Some of the stories that you've just told there's different ways of dealing with that. I actually have been a part of co-creating courses on that. If you think about it on a systemic level, like I could tell you, but we could talk about colonization. We could talk about, when you talk about history and school slowly changing, it's usually the Eurocentric story. When you're looking at, I have stats like even venture capital in America, only 1% of Black people are chosen for venture capital. 1%. And there's like 39%, I think, in America of Black people. I think that was a stat. I can't remember. So that's one story. Like, there's the marginalization, but people have resisted from the beginning. Right. And so in terms of speaking up, people are speaking up for themselves, like the Mestiza movement, mostly in Mexico, where women, I believe it is, come together who are of mixed identity, for example, where they're indigenous and white, and their pride. And there's a whole movement of responding to colonialism in a way that's rooted in their own mix of cultures. Right. There's African American and Canadian vernacular that's not necessarily accepted in the universities. If you want to go to university, and there's books that have been written about that, the civil rights movement, the feminist movement. So these are all ways of speaking out. Black Lives Matter, disability rights, environmental, like Naomi Klein tells us, we only have 11 years left unless we do something really different. So I don't know if this is what you're speaking to. And then from that systemic, like whatever your vision is, like the inclusion of LGBTQI, and then how does that play it out? And you take that vision. And then when it comes down to the actual communication skills, I think it takes emotional intelligence. I think it takes knowing self. I think it takes knowing other. Like when we're in the last podcast, we talked about what it means to know myself. So for example, what am I like when I get triggered? What am I like when with dealing with power in a position of power? What are we like dealing together? How are we with conflict? There are many different ways of dealing with conflict. I mean, one way when it comes to domination, shut up, sit down, or whatever. There are other ways that take a little bit longer that have worked for thousands of years. And, I live in Canada, but Canada has only been in existence for 150 years. And those values imposed on 15,000 years of Turtle Island, right? But speaking to those things, it's, for me, all part of speaking up, having these conversations. Like somebody say, oh, you're telling me something that happened 15,000 years ago. Well, we're only around for 150 when so I'm talking about this country that I'm in right now, right? So does that answer your question? That's kind of.
No, that's part of it for sure. Now, speaking out against various forms of oppression, something just came to me when we see it. I am really trying to do some self-management and awareness when it comes to things happen. And we grow up saying sometimes, it's amazing when some of the documentaries I've seen with people speaking and saying horrible things against the Indigenous Blacks. And then I start to look at myself and think, what's acceptable for me? Even, I may not say honky or whatever, that sounds sweet compared to the N-word, the word nigger.
Right, because white people have power. They think it's funny.
Right. But, the thing about it is, but I start policing my implicit bias and things I say, or something will go on and I'll go and I start. My sister said something about, she said, well, that might not be correct either, Sandra. You got to look at that. And I loved that. And where I would be going, these white people, something that happens that's horrible. Like I was coaching someone who was totally being oppressed by the dominant group, so-called. And I felt it, I had to decompress. But I really, even the saying, when I get irritated like that and saying, those white people, what's wrong with them? I need to white out, kind of a thing. I have to look at policing my biases, policing things that I even say. And that's important for me to keep my heart pure, to keep my spirit alive before God and before man. So I'm checking. It's not easy. Hey, and I want to take myself deeper, and it's challenging to do. Speaking out against my own,
Okay, I got you. So you're not.
See what I'm saying? Where I might want others to speak out forms of oppression, do something about it. Do something. But inside is where I would suggest that people kind of look as well. Are you still saying things about our Indigenous brothers and sisters under your breath because maybe you don't have the backstory, or Indians or Indian brothers and sisters in South India, and how are we looking at people and what are we saying?
Well, that's back to the knowing self and taking accountability for yourself. Like I can tell you, for me, like I think there's different kinds of therapy. It doesn't work for everybody. It's a very Western construct, but I've done therapy. It's kind of a psychological method. I've done the Course in Miracles. Like I've discovered various paths. Like so, for example, I can speak my truth from a place of peace. I don't have to sit here. Like I believe in fighting, and I'm not saying that you can't be angry. I very much believe in anger. There's many different ways. Sometimes you're angry. Sometimes, but doing that inner work, whatever that means, coming to that deep place of peace. That's why I personally, I'm just speaking for myself, believe in people like Bell Hooks, Marianne Williamson, who speak to social justice as a politics of love, right? Right. So that's where I want to come from. And when I make mistakes, I want to own it. I want to, like that vulnerability, the stuff that Brené Brown talks about, is what makes us authentic, to show our vulnerability, to be able to learn, but not to say I'm wrong, mea culpa. Even if I'm wrong all the time, there has to be some room for self-mercy too, for self-love. And I'm not talking about using that as an excuse. I think that it's really easy to go there, particularly if I haven't really, except for my whiteness. But if for those that hold a lot of dominance, that piece is a lot of work. Where my dominance might play through is I did I think I've told you before, coaching for a good 25 years. So it's a lot of the students that I work with see me as this expert. And I'm constantly like encouraging, like we're equal, we're working in this together. I don't believe in this top down thing, but it's very easy once you gain a body of knowledge to start, I might say all the right words, but I might be at some unconscious or semi-conscious level, thinking I have the right answer.
Absolutely. Again, there's that awareness in action. And to me, with our audience, speaking out against various forms of oppression when we see it is also reciprocal.
Yes.
So you are speaking, I am speaking. And if there's a way in which I am respectfully standing up for what I believe is right, and you feel you can't join me if it's not safe or whatever, I get it. You can go away, go and do your thing. But if there's something I'm saying and you are close and connected to me, I do have an expectation that since we have that kind of a relationship, that as long as I'm being respectful, because I don't want to, in me speaking up, dehumanize somebody else again, And so speaking out against various forms of oppression, I think it calls for an expectation. If you are like you and I are learning about each other and becoming, in this work closer. So for me, if we are going to, I'm saying this because I had an instance with a friend where something happened at a store and I had to go to her after, her and another friend, both of them happened to be white, present white. And I was terribly hurt because I felt like there was an issue of bias or racism in the place. And I don't like to use that card because I'm not that type of person. Who's that type of person? But
is it a card?
Race card.
Right. But is it that, or is it just the truth?
No, it is the truth. But because of how things have gone down, you kind of just, you're like, but sometimes, I know what people may mean somehow about certain things, but this one time, because of who I am, and I know there's certain things that I don't care. I'm about my business. But so I had to handle this person. I had to talk to this person in the store because other people were bringing this certain item back, and it was the way I was being treated. And there's two people close to me standing there, and I was speaking respectfully, and I said, "Is this what this is? Is this racism? What is this?" And I was talking to the person, and it was clear. They started to raise their voice, but the expectation, the reciprocity, I wanted something from those that I've known for many years. I expected something. And of course, if they're listening to this, I love you, but it's the truth. And we've talked about it since. And I think with one of them anyway, and I was quite disappointed in that. Speaking out against forms of oppression is just not leaving your brother or sister that you love so dearly, whether Indigenous, whatever, Korean, they're from India, they're Muslim, whatever that looks like, not leaving them hanging there on their own. When you love everybody and you want to be, supporting them and speaking out when something is absolutely unacceptable.
Yeah, I totally agree. And that's an act of bravery. That's part of why I call my business getbraver.com. I remember when I was in the classroom, and a part of my work the whole time I was working, those 18 years that I worked there at CAMH, one of the women was a researcher, very quiet, had worked in Indigenous communities, also a white woman. And I was encouraging people, we were, actually at that time I wasn't doing it alone, encouraging people to speak the truth, the uncomfortable truth, because we would come up with these very thorny conversations, and we had a whole technology of how to do that respectfully. But, sometimes, just like you just said, stuff is going to come up. And I noticed, we do say that people who are in the classroom not participating can also be participating. So we're not forcing people to participate, but if you would, please do, step forward, and I'll ask, I didn't hear your voice. Did you want to speak? Whatever. Anyway, this one woman, she was so powerful. It hit me because it's a strategy that I used to use. She said at the end of the day, that because of the honesty of people, the way that you've just been honest, right? And the richness, even though we had some difficult conversations, very respectfully, she said normally, and she was just in her first 3 months of the job, and she said normally what she would do is whenever she comes into a new job, she just doesn't bring herself forth in any big way, so she knows what her place is. And she said, from now on, because we ask we ask a few questions at the end of the day. One of the questions is, what might you do differently? What have you learned, or whatever? She said, from now on, what she's going to do differently is she's going to be braver. And then she's going to speak up. Yeah. And she's going to bring herself forth, even though sometimes it's not safe. Like, we were trying to create a safer environment, but we couldn't promise that safety because everybody was new in the room, right? So we were also talking about bravery, and sometimes your knees might be shaking, but we choose to be brave in those moments. So in that moment, correct me if I'm wrong, you were being brave, even though, like people are saying, it's the race card. This was something that impacted you, and it's not, tears aren't enough, or pushing me off isn't enough. I want to say something. I'm going to be brave enough to say this, and then that's
I'm going to ask everybody right now, if you've watched this all the way here to this part, please subscribe. Because this is the way, if you're thinking, what can I do? Again, reciprocal. Subscribe and share it, and ask your friends to subscribe. I really believe in this content. Those that have subscribed, you've been really kind to me. Thank you for your feedback. Thank you for your messages. It means the world to me. It really does. I feel I'm sitting in my calling. I don't know how long I'll be doing this, but subscribe so we can get Lorrie back on. We can get others back on and continue to do this show. It really is amazing to me. So we've covered acknowledge and examine your eccentricity and the ways in which it has been used to oppress others. This was all supposed to be a little snapshot of last week. But we'll get into the other meat and potatoes, ackee and saltfish, next week.
I love
And
it.
number 2, speak out against various forms of oppression when we see it. That is a huge topic. And support the leadership. That's this one now. We might not have time, but Lorrie, we'll get into this one next time. We really will.
Okay.
We're going to meet, and Lorrie and I spend quite a bit of time together, don't we, Lorrie?
Yes.
Just a little half hour here every day. We're just doing it because it's life-changing work. It's transformative. Remember the scat. Remember that, because scat, again, is saturation, conversion, application, and transformation. It gets saturated to the point where you actually start doing the action, awareness and action. You guys are so amazing. I have a little commercial for you. Lorrie, see what we did again, but it's fabulous. All right. Thank you, Dana. Here's the commercial. Voices of humanity, we need to hear your voices. We need to hear your voices. You guys are great. Subscribe. Okay. It's really going to be getting better. And again, it's not your fault or mine, but together we can do something about it. I met Lorrie. She was referred to me by a friend. And I thought, okay, sometimes you don't know where these things are going to go, right? But this work is really important to the both of us. And I hope that you have received something from us today. We're going to continue doing this work. Lorrie will be back with us next week because we still haven't given you all that we wanted to. And we'll keep going. And then I'm going to have somebody else. And then Lorrie will come back again. We'll do it like that. Thank you so very much. Is there anything you want to leave with the people there, Lorrie?
I love your last words. They're enough.
Oh, thank you. All right. So take care of yourself. Send me a link, Lorrie, when we get off, because we can decompress a little bit today.
Okay.
All right. Thank you. Bye, everybody.